It was supposed to be a quick stop before heading home. The city streets buzzed with life as Maya Brooks, a sharply dressed black woman in her mid-30s, walked out of a cafe, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. She had just finished a long day at work, but nobody around her would have guessed what her job really was. To everyone passing by, she looked like any other professional in the city, her tailored navy blue blazer and confident stride blending into the fast-paced urban rhythm. But Maya wasn't just any woman. She was a high-ranking CIA agent, a woman trained to handle high-stakes situations. Yet on this particular day, she wasn't expecting trouble. That changed the moment she saw the flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the glass windows ahead. Two uniformed officers stood by a parked police cruiser on the corner. Their eyes locked onto Maya as she approached her car, and within seconds, they moved in. The older of the two, Officer Daniels, stepped forward, his hand resting near his holster. His partner, a younger officer named Carter, stood slightly behind, scanning Maya with a scrutinizing gaze. Something about the way they carried themselves sent a wave of irritation through her. She had seen this before. "Excuse me, ma'am," Daniel said, his tone firm, but with a forced politeness that barely masked suspicion. "We need to ask you a few questions." Maya glanced at them, her expression calm, measured. She had been in countless situations more dangerous than this, but there was something unsettling about being confronted this way in her own city, where she should have felt safe. She knew exactly where this was going, but she decided to play along. "Is there a problem, officers?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. Daniels took a step closer. "There have been reports of suspicious activity in the area," he said vaguely. "Mind telling us what you're doing here?" Maya's grip on her coffee cup tightened slightly, but she didn't let her frustration show. "I just picked up my coffee and was about to head home," she answered evenly. "Is there a reason you're stopping me?" Carter, who had been quiet until now, glanced at her car and then at her again. "Can we see some ID?" His tone wasn't a request, it was an order. Maya exhaled quietly, setting her coffee on the roof of her car before reaching into her purse. Years of training had conditioned her to stay calm under pressure, but it didn't make moments like this any less exhausting. She knew she had done nothing wrong. Still, she retrieved her driver's license and handed it to them. Daniels examined it, exchanging a glance with Carter. It was clear they were looking for a reason to escalate the situation. "What brings you to this neighborhood?" Daniels pressed, handing her ID back without so much as a nod. Maya's patience was wearing thin. "I work in the city," she said, keeping her voice neutral. "Is there a law against stopping for coffee after work?" Carter shifted his stance, his hand resting on his belt. "We've had reports of car break-ins nearby," he said, his voice carrying an edge now. "We just need to verify everything." Maya narrowed her eyes. "And do I match the description of a suspect?" A pause. Daniels hesitated, clearly realizing that he was being challenged. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. "We're just doing our jobs, ma'am," he said, the patronizing tone making Maya's stomach turn. "If you cooperate, this will go a lot smoother." She knew what he meant. If she didn't comply, if she questioned them any further, things could escalate. And yet, Maya also knew something else. She outranked both of these men in ways they couldn't even imagine. She reached into her blazer pocket, slowly, deliberately, watching as both officers tensed. Their hands inched closer to their weapons, but she wasn't pulling out anything threatening. Instead, she retrieved a sleek leather badge holder and flipped it open, revealing an official CIA identification card. The shift in their expressions was almost comical. Daniel's face paled slightly, his eyes scanning the badge with disbelief, while Carter blinked rapidly, clearly caught off guard. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Maya allowed a small, knowing smile to cross her lips. "I appreciate the concern, officers," she said, her voice cool and controlled. "But I think we both know I don't fit the description of whoever you're looking for." The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken tension. Carter cleared his throat. "You're with the CIA?" he asked, sounding unsure if he should believe what he was seeing. Maya nodded, slipping the badge back into her pocket. "That's correct, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't waste any more of my time." Daniels opened his mouth as if to respond, but nothing came out. He was scrambling for a way to recover from what had just happened, to regain control of a situation that had so quickly slipped from his grasp. Maya could see it all over his face, the realization that he had just harassed someone who had more authority than he could ever dream of. "You have a nice day, officers," she said smoothly, grabbing her coffee from the roof of her car. She didn't wait for a response before opening her door and sliding inside. She could still see them standing there in her rearview mirror, looking stunned, humiliated, unsure of what to do next. As she pulled away from the curb, Maya exhaled slowly. This wasn't the first time she had experienced something like this, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. But this time was different. This time she had left them speechless. Maya kept her hands steady on the wheel as she drove through the city streets, her mind racing. The encounter with the officers had left a familiar frustration simmering beneath her calm exterior. It wasn't the first time she had been unfairly singled out, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. But tonight, there was something different about the way they had approached her, something more intense, more deliberate. It wasn't just casual profiling, there was something else at play, and Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to figure out what it was. She took a deep breath, reminding herself to let it go, but her instincts wouldn't let her. As a CIA agent, she was trained to read people, to sense when something was off. And those officers hadn't just been following a routine protocol. There was a certain urgency in their eyes, something unsaid that lingered between their words. Were they really just on a power trip, or had she unknowingly stumbled into something bigger? Her phone buzzed in the passenger seat, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen. A message from Langley. ***, briefing moved up. Report at HQ. Urgent ***. Maya's stomach tightened. That was never a good sign. Changing the time of a briefing, especially last minute, meant something serious was happening. She took the next exit, merging onto the highway. The CIA headquarters was a long drive from where she was, but she'd been trained to move fast. She made a mental note to check in on the officers who had stopped her. If they were looking for someone, she needed to know who. By the time she pulled into the heavily guarded facility, the night sky had settled into complete darkness. Security was tighter than usual, an immediate sign that whatever she was walking into was major. She showed her credentials at the gate, and within minutes she was inside, making her way through the maze of sterile hallways until she reached the briefing room. The room was already filled with agents, some she recognized, others she didn't. A large screen at the front displayed satellite images, tactical maps, and classified reports. At the head of the room stood Director James Monroe, a man known for his no-nonsense approach. His expression was grim as he waited for silence before speaking. "We have a situation," Monroe began, his voice steady but heavy. "There's been chatter about a high-profile target operating under the radar in the city. We believe this individual is connected to a larger network that poses a national security threat. And we just received intel that they may be planning something soon." Maya leaned forward, scanning the images on the screen. Names and coded messages flickered across the display. None of it looked familiar, until one grainy image caught her eye. Her breath hitched. It was a street camera still from earlier that evening, taken near the cafe where she had been stopped. And in the corner of the frame, half obscured by shadows, was a figure that looked vaguely familiar. Monroe continued, unaware of Maya's reaction. We don't have a full ID on them yet, but they've been moving in and out of high-security areas without detection. Someone with skills, someone who knows how to disappear. We need to find them before they make their next move. Maya's mind reeled. Could this be why those officers had been acting so strangely? Had they been looking for this person? If so, why had they been so focused on her instead? She kept her expression neutral, but inside, her instincts were kicking into high gear. She needed to get her hands on more intel. After the meeting, she approached one of her closest colleagues, Agent Ryan Carter, a former military intelligence officer known for his resourcefulness. If anyone could pull extra data for her, it was him. Ryan, I need access to the street cam footage from earlier tonight, she said in a hushed tone. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Something catch your attention, maybe, she admitted. I was in that area tonight, and something about the way the local cops were acting felt off. If they were looking for this guy, I want to know why they were more focused on me. Ryan nodded, understanding the unspoken layers of what she was saying. Give me a few hours. I'll see what I can pull. Maya exhaled, feeling a small sense of relief. At least she wasn't alone in this. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized she might have just stepped into something far bigger than she anticipated. Hours later, she was back in her apartment, staring at her laptop screen as Ryan's files loaded. The security footage flickered on, playing back the scene from the cafe street. The officers were already there when the mystery figure appeared, barely visible in the shadows. Then, just moments before she walked into view, the figure did something strange. He turned his head slightly, as if he saw her coming, then slipped away unnoticed. It was almost as if he wanted her to be seen instead. Maya felt her pulse quicken. Had she been used as a distraction? If so, by whom? And why? A knock at her door made her jump. She wasn't expecting anyone. Moving cautiously, she approached the peephole. The hallway was dimly lit, but standing just outside was Officer Daniels. She didn't open the door immediately. Instead, she checked the time. It was well past midnight. What was he doing here? Agent Brooks, his voice came through the door, lower than before, lacking the authority he had used earlier. We need to talk. It's important. Maya's mind raced through possibilities. If he was here alone, that meant whatever he had to say wasn't exactly official, which also meant it could be a trap. She reached for the small handgun she kept by the door, just in case. Then, taking a steady breath, she unlocked the door and opened it just enough to see him clearly. Daniels looked different from before, less sure of himself, maybe even a little shaken. I think we both know tonight wasn't just a routine stop, he said, his voice low. Maya studied him carefully. What do you know? He glanced over his shoulder, as if making sure no one was watching. Then he leaned in slightly. The person we were looking for, they weren't just some suspect. They were someone with connections, someone dangerous. And I think you were meant to be in the wrong place at the right time. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. If that was true, then the question wasn't just who this mystery figure was. It was why they had made sure she got involved. Maya held the door open just enough to study Daniel's face. He wasn't just nervous, he was afraid. His eyes darted down the hallway, his posture tense. He was worried about being seen here, and that alone told her he wasn't lying. But that didn't mean she could trust him either. Who sent you? She asked, keeping her voice calm but firm. Daniels hesitated before answering. No one. Look, I shouldn't even be here. But after what happened tonight, I started putting pieces together. There's something bigger going on, something way above my pay grade. And I think you're in the middle of it, whether you realize it or not. Maya studied him carefully, her grip tightening slightly on the door. Why don't you start at the beginning? Daniel sighed and leaned in closer. We were given an anonymous tip-off about a high-priority suspect spotted near that cafe. But here's the thing, we weren't the first ones looking for him. Someone else was already there, watching. I didn't think much of it at the time, but after you showed up, it felt like a setup. The moment we started questioning you, they disappeared. Like they wanted us distracted. Maya's mind raced. The person she had seen in the footage, the one who slipped away the second she arrived, it made sense now. They weren't running from the police. They had intentionally made sure she was the one left behind, drawing all the attention. You recognized them, didn't you? Maya pressed. Daniels hesitated again, shifting his weight. Not exactly. But I've seen people like that before, operatives. Not the kind that work for us, though. The kind that move in the shadows, doing things no one talks about. Maya's pulse quickened. If this person was part of a covert network, it meant they were playing a dangerous game. But why involve her? Daniels lowered his voice even more. There's another thing. After you left, I got a call from someone high up. They told me to drop it. Just like that. No reports, no follow-up, nothing. And trust me, that doesn't happen unless someone powerful is pulling the strings. Maya exhaled slowly. This was getting worse by the minute. If orders were coming from above to shut this down, it meant there were forces at play far beyond a simple police stop. She took a step back, gesturing for Daniels to come inside. He hesitated, then followed, his eyes scanning the room like he expected someone to be listening. Maya shut the door behind him. You're in over your head, she said. But so am I. And if we don't figure this out fast, we won't be the only ones. Daniels nodded grimly. Then we need to start asking the right questions. Like who that guy really is, and what he's planning. Maya crossed her arms, her mind already working through possibilities. The CIA briefing had mentioned a security threat, someone slipping in and out of high-profile areas undetected. If this person was the same one she had encountered, then whatever they were planning, it wasn't small. She pulled out her laptop and opened the footage Ryan had sent her earlier. She played it again, this time slowing it down, analyzing every movement. The way the suspect moved, the way they scanned their surroundings, it wasn't random. They were trained, methodical. And that meant they had a goal. Daniels leaned in, watching the screen. Pause it there, he said suddenly. Maya froze the frame. The figure was caught mid-step, their face just barely visible in the dim lighting. It wasn't much, but it was enough to see one crucial detail. A tattoo on their wrist. Daniel's eyes widened. I've seen that symbol before. Maya turned to him. Where? A case I worked a year ago. It was sealed, but I remember it. A smuggling ring, but not just any ring. These guys weren't after money. They were after classified intel, weapons, anything they could sell to the highest bidder. Maya's jaw tightened. If this person was connected to that, it meant they weren't working alone. And if they had resurfaced now, in this city, it wasn't by accident. Daniels ran a hand through his hair. If they're back, it means they're after something big. And if they wanted you involved, it's not a coincidence. Maya clenched her fists. She didn't like being played, and she definitely didn't like being used as a pawn in someone else's game. But now she had no choice but to play along, because whatever was coming, she had to stop it before it was too late. She turned back to the screen, staring at the blurred image of the man who had set this all in motion. Then we find him, she said. before he finds us." Maya's heart pounded as she stared at the frozen image on the screen. The tattoo on the suspect's wrist was a clear mark of affiliation, one she had encountered before, years ago, in an operation that had gone terribly wrong. It wasn't just any smuggling ring. This group had deep ties to underground intelligence networks, selling information to the highest bidder. Operating in shadows, even seasoned agents struggled to penetrate. If they were back, it meant something big was coming. And for some reason, they had made sure she was caught in the middle of it. Daniel shifted beside her, his expression darkening. This is bad. If these guys are resurfacing now, they aren't here for small-scale deals. They want something valuable, something worth taking huge risks for. Maya exhaled slowly, her mind racing. "Or someone," she murmured, barely above a whisper. Daniels frowned. "What do you mean?" She turned to face him. "What if I wasn't just a distraction? What if I was the target?" Daniel's face paled slightly. "That would mean they knew exactly who you were before the police stopped you." Maya nodded. "Which means someone on the inside gave them that information." The thought sent a chill down her spine. The CIA had protocols in place to prevent leaks, but she had seen enough in her career to know that no system was flawless. If someone had access to her identity and movements, then this wasn't just a random operation. It was a direct attack. Daniels pushed a hand through his hair. "Okay, let's assume they've been tracking you. Why now? What's changed?" Maya thought back to her last mission before this. The details were still classified, even to Daniels, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something from that case had followed her here. She had uncovered something that wasn't meant to see the light of day. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed on the table. An unknown number. She and Daniels exchanged a look before she picked it up and answered. A distorted voice came through the line. "You're asking the wrong questions, Agent Taylor." Maya froze. "Who is this?" The voice ignored her. "You want answers? Meet me at the abandoned train station at midnight. Come alone." The call ended abruptly. Daniel's jaw tightened. "That's a trap." Maya set her phone down. "I know, but we don't have a choice." Daniels shook his head. "No, Maya. You don't have a choice. This is about you. They want you isolated." She knew he was right, but that didn't mean she was going in blind. She glanced at the footage again, at the blurred figure who had slipped away so easily. If this was a game, she was done playing by their rules. Later that night, Maya arrived at the train station, her senses sharp, every instinct on high alert. The platform was empty, dimly lit by a few flickering streetlights. The air was thick with the smell of rust and damp concrete. A single figure stood at the far end, just beyond the glow of the lights. Maya approached cautiously, her fingers inches from the concealed weapon at her side. The figure stepped forward. It was a woman, older, with sharp eyes and a presence that commanded attention. "You're as careful as they say," she said, her voice calm, almost amused. Maya kept her stance firm. "Who are you?" The woman studied her for a moment before speaking. "Someone who knows the truth about what's coming, and someone who knows you don't have much time to stop it." Maya narrowed her eyes. "Stop what?" The woman took another step closer. "A leak. The kind that could bring entire governments to their knees." Maya's breath caught. This was bigger than she had imagined. But before she could press for more, a sudden noise cut through the silence. Footsteps. Multiple. They weren't alone. Maya's muscles tensed as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the abandoned train station. The woman standing before her didn't flinch, didn't turn to look. It was as if she expected this. Maya's instincts screamed at her to move, to take cover, but she held her ground, scanning the shadows for movement. Then out of the darkness, several figures emerged, men dressed in plain clothes, their movements precise, calculated. Not street thugs, not common criminals. These were professionals, operatives, and they were closing in fast. Maya's pulse quickened, but her expression remained cold, unreadable. "Friends of yours?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. The woman exhaled, a flicker of regret passing through her eyes. "Not exactly." Maya understood immediately. This meeting had been compromised. The woman, whoever she was, had been followed, or worse, she had been working with them all along. Before Maya could react, one of the men stepped forward. He was tall, built like a soldier, his eyes sharp and unwavering. "Agent Taylor," he said, his voice controlled but firm. "You're coming with us." Maya tilted her head slightly, studying him. "And if I don't?" The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Then we do this the hard way." Maya's grip tightened around the small concealed blade in her sleeve. "I was hoping you'd say that." Without another word, she moved. A sharp twist of her wrist sent the blade flying toward the nearest man, striking just deep enough to stagger him. She spun, using the distraction to grab the woman and pull her behind an old, rusted pillar for cover. Gunfire erupted, the deafening sound bouncing off the concrete walls. Sparks flew as bullets struck metal, the train station instantly turning into a war zone. Maya pressed against the pillar, her mind racing. She needed an exit, fast. The woman beside her was breathing heavily, her earlier calm now replaced with urgency. "There's a service tunnel," she said, pointing toward a darkened area past the tracks. "If we can make it." Maya didn't let her finish. She grabbed the woman's arm and moved. They sprinted across the open space, bullets whizzing past them, boots pounding against the ground behind them. Maya could hear the operatives shouting, giving orders, closing in. Reaching the tunnel entrance, Maya shoved the woman forward. "Go." She turned, firing a few precise shots from the sidearm she had lifted off one of the men in the chaos. A few went down, but more were coming. They weren't trying to kill her. They needed her alive. And that was somehow more terrifying. Ducking into the tunnel, she slammed the rusted gate behind them and locked it. It wouldn't hold for long, but it gave them a few seconds. The woman gasped for breath. "You should have left me." Maya shot her a look. "Not my style." The woman's eyes darkened. "Then you need to know the truth." Maya was about to respond when a loud metallic bang echoed from the gate. The operatives were trying to break through. No time to waste. "Talk while we move," Maya ordered, leading them deeper into the tunnel. The woman hesitated, then nodded. "This isn't just about you. It's about what you uncovered. That mission you completed, the one they told you was wrapped up. It wasn't." Maya's chest tightened. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed sent a fresh wave of adrenaline through her system. "Go on." The woman swallowed hard. "You weren't just investigating an organization. You were exposing something much bigger. Corruption at the highest levels. People inside your own agency." Maya stopped in her tracks. "You're saying—" "Yes," the woman cut in. "The people coming after you, they're not just operatives. They're the ones pulling the strings." Maya's mind raced. If that was true, then there was no one left to trust. And she was running out of time. Maya's breath was steady, but her heart pounded in her chest. The tunnel stretched ahead, dark and damp, but she knew they didn't have much time before their pursuers broke through. The woman beside her, who had just revealed a truth more dangerous than Maya had ever imagined, kept glancing back, her fear evident. Maya kept moving, gripping the gun she had taken. If what the woman said was true, then she wasn't just running from a rogue team of operatives. She was running from people who controlled everything, the kind of people who made problems disappear. And now she was their biggest problem. Ahead, the tunnel split into two paths. Maya hesitated for only a second before choosing the left, relying on instincts she had sharpened over years of being in the field. The woman followed without question. The air was heavy with moisture, the scent of rust and damp concrete filling Maya's lungs as they ran. Then a sound behind them, metal crashing against stone. They were inside. The chase wasn't over. Maya quickened her pace, scanning for an escape. Just as they rounded a bend, she spotted something, light seeping through a set of worn metal bars. An old maintenance exit. Their way out. She reached for the bars, but they didn't budge. Locked. A second later, voices filled the tunnel. The operatives were close, moving fast. Maya had seconds to decide. She turned to the woman. "Stay behind me." The woman barely had time to nod before the first shadow appeared. Maya fired, forcing them to take cover. She moved quickly, grabbing a loose pipe from the ground and slamming it against the lock on the bars. The rusted metal groaned but didn't break. The gunfire from the operatives became more precise. They were done playing. Maya struck again, harder. This time, the lock snapped, the door swinging open with a sharp creak. "Move," she ordered, pushing the woman forward. They burst into the open air, emerging in an alley behind an abandoned building. Maya slammed the door shut behind them, wedging the pipe into the handle. It wouldn't hold them off for long, but it would buy them a few seconds. The woman was shaking. "They won't stop, will they?" Maya looked at her. "Not unless we stop them first." For a moment, the woman hesitated. Then her expression hardened. "I have proof," she whispered. "Documents, audio files, everything." Maya's eyes locked onto hers. This was it. The key to everything. "Where?" The woman exhaled. "A safety deposit box. In my name. The bank on 12th and Carson." Maya nodded. That wasn't far. But they needed a plan. She glanced around, spotting an old car parked in the alley. The keys were still inside. A stroke of luck. "We drive," Maya said. "Fast." Minutes later, they were weaving through the city, staying off the main roads, keeping a low profile. Maya checked the rearview mirror constantly, expecting to see headlights tailing them. But the streets remained quiet. Too quiet. The bank came into view. A small, unassuming building, the kind of place that wouldn't draw attention. They parked a block away, moving quickly but cautiously. Inside, the woman approached the counter, her voice calm but urgent as she requested access to her box. The clerk barely glanced at her before nodding. A few keystrokes later, she was leading them to the vault. Maya stood at the entrance, scanning for threats. So far, nothing. But her instincts screamed that something was wrong. Then the woman emerged, clutching a small folder. "This is it," she whispered. Maya reached for it just as a voice cut through the silence. "Going somewhere?" Maya spun, her gun already raised. The man standing in the doorway was familiar. Too familiar. It was her former handler, the one who had sent her on that final mission, the one she had trusted. His face was unreadable, but his eyes held something almost like regret. Maya, put the gun down. She didn't. He sighed. "You're good, one of the best. But you don't win this fight." Maya's grip tightened. "You don't get to decide that." His expression didn't change. "Neither do you." Then movement behind him. More operatives. Weapons drawn. Maya's mind raced. They were boxed in. No way out. And then the unexpected. The woman beside her suddenly stepped forward, holding up the folder. "You want this," she said, voice shaking. "Fine. Take it." She threw it, not to them, but into the air. Papers scattered everywhere. Documents, photos, everything. And at that moment, Maya saw her opening. She moved. Fast. Gunfire erupted, but she was already diving for cover, pulling the woman with her. They hit the ground as bullets shredded the air above them. But then sirens. Loud. Close. Maya looked up just in time to see black SUVs pulling up outside. And from them, figures emerging, not operatives, not the enemy, but federal agents. Real ones. The man in the doorway cursed under his breath, stepping back, eyes darting toward the exits. Maya smirked. Checkmate. It was over. Almost. The room was silent except for the heavy breathing of those who had just been caught in the middle of the chaos. Maya kept her gun trained on her former handler, her hand steady even as her pulse pounded in her ears. Outside, the flashing lights of the federal agents' vehicles painted the walls in red and blue. The operatives who had been after her just moments ago were frozen in place, their advantage slipping through their fingers. Maya's handler, the man she had once trusted with her life, let out a slow breath and raised his hands in surrender. There was no fight left in him, not when the situation had turned against him so completely. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something almost human in them. Regret, maybe. Or resignation. The lead federal agent stepped inside, weapon drawn but calm. His gaze swept over the scene, then landed on Maya. Agent Reynolds, you're clear. We've got them from here. Maya hesitated for only a second before lowering her weapon. The tension in her shoulders didn't ease, but she knew it was over. The woman beside her, Jasmine, was still gripping the scattered documents, her hands shaking. It had been her bravery that turned the tide, her quick thinking that had given them the opening they needed. Now she looked at Maya, searching for reassurance. Maya nodded. It's done. The agents moved in, cuffing the rogue operatives and securing the evidence. Jasmine stepped forward, placing the last of the documents in the hands of the federal agents. Everything was there, the proof of corruption, the betrayals, the operations that had destroyed lives. It would be impossible to bury this now. As the men who had once hunted her were led away, Maya turned back to her handler. He didn't say anything, just watched her with the quiet acceptance of a man who knew he had lost. She thought about all the times she had followed his orders without question, believing she was working for the right side. Now she realized he had never truly been on any side but his own. You trained me well, she said finally. That's the only reason I'm standing here. For a brief moment, something flickered across his face. Pride, maybe. Then he was gone, escorted out of the building in handcuffs. Maya exhaled and turned to Jasmine. Come on, she said. Let's get out of here. They stepped outside, into the cool night air, where the chaos of flashing lights and radio chatter filled the space around them. Maya could finally breathe, but the weight of everything that had happened still pressed against her. The fight was over, but the scars would remain. Jasmine wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the city stretching out before them. I thought I was dead back there, she admitted. I thought we'd never make it out. Maya glanced at her. You didn't just make it out, she said. You fought back. You saved us both. Jasmine let out a short, breathy laugh. I guess I did. For the first time in what felt like forever, Maya allowed herself a small smile. The federal agent from earlier approached them, his expression serious but not unkind. You should both get some rest. This is going to be a long investigation, But you've done your part. You're safe now. Maya nodded, though she wasn't sure she fully believed it yet. After everything, safety felt like a distant concept, something she had been running from rather than toward. But as she looked at Jasmine, at the quiet determination in her eyes, she realized that maybe, just maybe, this was a new beginning. Hours later, they found themselves in a quiet diner on the outskirts of the city, sipping coffee that was too strong but comforting in its own way. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving only exhaustion in its place. Jasmine stirred her drink absently. So, what happens now? Maya leaned back, considering the question. They'll clean up the mess. The truth will come out. And you. She gave Jasmine a pointed look. You get your life back. Jasmine let out a slow breath. I don't even know what that means anymore. You'll figure it out, Maya said. You've already done the hard part. Jasmine met her gaze. And you? Maya hesitated. The life she had built, the one she thought she understood, was gone. The people she trusted had turned against her. And yet, for the first time in years, she wasn't following orders. She was making her own choices. I don't know, she admitted, but I think I'm finally free to decide. The weight of those words settled between them. For the first time in years, Maya wasn't looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next mission, the next deception. She was finally in control of her own path. The diner was quiet except for the hum of an old radio in the corner. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the battle that had just played out in its shadows. But Maya knew that, in some way, they had changed something. Maybe not the world, but at least their place in it. Jasmine smiled, small but real. To new beginnings, then. Maya lifted her coffee cup in response. To new beginnings. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she meant it.